All right, let's take a look at comparisons and the formation of adjectives and adverbs. So first I want to show you these patterns in English. And remember that these patterns were created for linguists to describe the language. But the language comes first, and because the language comes first, and because the language is constantly changing and developing, the language itself doesn't always fit the nice patterns. So we'll see all the patterns in English. You'll see that in Greek it doesn't always fit in the patterns. Sometimes that's because we're specifically looking at the New Testament and not all forms are there. Sometimes it's just because the language doesn't match the patterns that grammarians want to put onto the language. However, we do see some patterns, and that can be helpful. So in English, we have an adjective like strong, and when we want to compare the strength of two different things, we add an ER, and one is stronger than the other. And then when we've compared three or more things, or even just two things, and we want to talk about the one that is more than anything else, that's the superlative. And in English, we put EST on the end. So we have strongest. Then if we want to take that adjective and use it to modify a verb, we often put ly on the end. It becomes strongly. He was strongly disposed to believe her. Note that the adverbial form, it's kind of in a separate category because the adverbs modify verbs, so they're going to look completely different when you run into them in the sentence. But they're formed on the same root. That's why they get lumped together. Okay, so we have strong, stronger, strongest, and then strongly. We have happy, happier, happiest, and then happily. We have wise, wiser, wisest, and then wisely. We have great, greater, greatest, and then greatly. We have small, smaller, smallest. There used to be in English a word called smally. We don't really use smally anymore in English. We might say slightly. There might be other words that we would use. Now, when we get long words, we no longer add ER at the end in English. Instead, we use the words more and most. So someone is comfortable, and then more comfortable, and then most comfortable, and then comfortably. We still add the ly on the end for the adverb, but when we get long words, I think it's 3 syllables or more is the rule, you don't say comfortable or comfortabliest or something like that. We say more and most. Same thing with intelligent, intelligent, more intelligent, most intelligent, but then we still do intelligently. Now, all languages have words that break the rules. They come from older patterns and they're often the most used words. And the same is true in English. So we have good, better, best, and then well. We have bad, worse, worst, and then badly. We have much, more, most, and then greatly. So those don't quite fit the patterns. The same is true in Greek, except of course with different endings. So we have sophos, which is wise. And then if we want to compare the wisdom of two different people, we add teros on the end. And if the root has a vowel, we lengthen the vowel. So sophoteros, and then that would be wiser. And then wisest is sophotatos. Tatos is the ending that works the way EST does in English. Adverbs are made in actually two ways. Sometimes they're made by the ending omega sigma, so sophos, but just so you're aware, and we'll see this in the last example, sometimes the accusative form of an adjective is used to create the adverb. So if you see an accusative form and it's kind of floating around, not attached to any noun, and it seems like it might fit as an adverb, it's an adverb. Okay, so same with righteous. We have dikaios, dikaiotoros. Here, because it ends in a diphthong, the root ends in a diphthong, we add the omicron. So dikaiotoros, dikaiotatos, and then the adverb is dikaios. So Then we have some that don't quite match the patterns. We have agathos, which is good, but instead of better, we have kreison. Now, the other difficult thing, and this really does cause translation problems sometimes, is that in Greek, the comparative is sometimes used for the superlative. Languages are funny that way. There's an expression in French that I've always puzzled about. French doesn't have two different words for like and love. And so it uses the word love for both. So je t'aime means I love you. And je t'aime is what a husband says to his wife. Well, what do you say for your friend then when you want to distinguish? Well, in French, you add the word well, the adverb well to the sentence. So je t'aime bien, even though we're adding I love you well, I love you goodly, sort of, it actually diminishes the feeling, which is absolutely counterintuitive and doesn't make any sense logically, but that's how the language works. Je t'aime is I love you, je t'aime bien is I like you. So again, just as an example of the way languages don't always follow patterns. And here in Greek, the comparative became used for the superlative. So if I were to say, this is a smaller outfit, in Greek, you have to weigh it. Do they mean this is the smallest, or do they just mean it's a little bit smaller? And there's a couple places in the New Testament where that makes a difference. And I wish I could remember off the top of my head what they are, but I can't. So anyway, but let's look at these patterns that don't quite fit the pattern. This is the pattern, though. It's important to know the pattern because that's what it's going to be most of the time. But these are the other words you'll run into. So agathos, and then is good, and then better is kreison. And then the adverb for agathos is eu. Now, this is a really helpful one to know because you'll see that eu show up as a prefix, a suffix, in various words, and you just know it means good. And so that can be helpful in other ways as well to help you remember vocabulary. Kakos is bad, and worse is keiron, sorry. And then the adverb is kakos. Megas is great, and greater is meizon. Polus is much or many, and then the comparative is pleion, and the adverb is pola. This is more, this is an accusative ending, right? So that happens sometimes. Mikros is small. Mikroteros is smaller. And so far it follows the patterns, but then for smallest, it's elakistos, and for the adverb is mikros. There used to be a word mala, but that's obsolete now in our New Testament time, but we still have malon for more and malista for most. Axios is actually a really important word. You'll run into this a lot in the New Testament. Axios for worthy and axios for worthily. Pantos is, as you can imagine, from panta, and it means, I know that Duff translates it as by all means, but if you think of totally, even with the sort of California American expressions, totally, I can't do the accent, but it has to do with absolutely, by all means, definitely. And then ontos means really, and you can think of the participle of eimi, on, and then the adverb ontos has to do with being. And so it really is real. It really is true. It is the case that this is what is, right? So really. And then protos is first. Proton can be firstly, the accusative, and protos means for the first time. So that's what this section is about. I'm actually not going to go through the practice. Look at those yourself and make sure you recognize them. The other thing to remember that I didn't put on this chart is that when you are comparing two things, the thing that you're comparing to is in the genitive, or sometimes it has the a, the word that looks like or, but sometimes it means then. So it's greater than, and then the other word will be there. Duff says that that second noun will be in the same case as the first noun. It can, if I remember right, also be in the genitive, even with the a, but certainly the genitive will be there if there is no a. That's really important to remember, and it's one of those little things that gets forgotten. At least I forgot it when I was starting in Greek, especially words like axios. You're going to run into this genitive word that doesn't seem to make sense unless you realize there's a comparison going on there. All right, that's it for this section. I'll come back and talk a little bit about the optatives, and then we'll be done chapter 20. Be sure and let me know if you have any questions.